Until that point, Germany's panzer divisions had utilized light and medium tanks to devastating effect during their Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. But Adolf Hitler became obsessed with the idea of a big tank, with heavy armor and a killer gun. He would work with his top designers to come up with the Tiger, a 60-ton monster armed with the awesome 88mm gun. The 88mm gun had originally seen service as an anti-aircraft weapon. It was designed to blast a 20-pound shell 30,000 feet into the air and annihilate heavy bombers. Then, the Germans discovered it was even more deadly against the armor of tanks.
What you need in an anti-aircraft weapon is very high velocity, long barrel, so that the trajectory of the round is more or less flat. As they discover, if you pointed at a tank and fired this high velocity round, it would go straight through this tank armor.
The Tiger and its killer bite would be rushed into action for the assault on Leningrad in August 1942, spreading dread among the Allies. The fear factor was about to go through the roof.
Listen to this. Reports Oberst attached Henschel boasted of new tank which would win the war. Armor twice as thick as existing tanks, it could travel underwater, and he wouldn't be surprised if it could even fly.
Pretty well ahead with it, too.
One of its principal roles in military operations is what's called shock action. This idea that suddenly tons and tons of metal come storming through a position and you can't do anything about it. That introduced a lot of fear in Allied soldiers. Now, if you've ever heard tanks manoeuvring, particularly at night, it is terrifying. You've got hugely powerful engines for a start, which they sound like aircraft warming up on the ground. You've got all the metal tracks clanking around. They're firing their weapons, they make a hell of a noise as well. And quite rightly, people are terrified of them.
The boots on the ground especially feared this new SS super tank. Moffett-Burris saw the devastating effect of the Tiger's 88mm gun when his buddy was vaporized by one.
Tiger tank was back behind us firing. I was wearing a raincoat. I stepped on the raincoat and tripped, and just as I did, an 88 shell went right where my head was. The man that was in front of me just blew him apart.
The American paratroopers hit back with whatever they could get their hands on. But the shells just bounced off. Now it was time for the Tiger to strike back.
And I could see the gun, the Tiger tank, wheel around, and it hit that gun, just blew it apart, killed them, dumped them right in front of us. And that's a little disconcerting when you see that.
Across Europe, the Tiger in the hands of the SS would reign supreme.
This thing it's huge, it's very heavily armored, it has a great gun. If you ran across a Tiger, well, gee, that would ruin your day.
The Tiger would often face off against the American Sherman tank. The Sherman was the main tank of the Allied Army, but it was much smaller, lighter, and fielded a less powerful main gun. The Tiger's 88mm could penetrate the Sherman's 3-inch armor at over a mile, well beyond the effective killing range of the Sherman's much lighter gun.
The 88mm gun could turn an M4 Sherman tank into a hunk of molten metal very, very quickly.
The Tiger's killing prowess was coupled with deadly tactics from Waffen-SS tank aces. One such commander would go down in history, Michael Vittman.
Wittmann had been a member of the Waffen-SS since the late 30s. He'd risen through the ranks and become an officer. Through the Russian campaign, he had demonstrated he was the great Tiger tank ace of the Second World War.
In June 1944, Wittmann would inflict hell on a British convoy in the Normandy village of Villers-Bocage.
He was an amazing tanker, feared and respected by his adversaries.
He utilized his favorite tactic of hitting the lead and the rear vehicle, understanding that if you can't go forward and you can't go backwards, everybody in between is caught in a fire trap.
The Waffen-SS ace was credited with destroying 27 tanks in just one day. Wittmann became a legend.
I think just the most extraordinary tank-to-tank action that was fought in the Second World War.
In the hands of the Waffen-SS, the Tiger would rule. The Tiger was the ultimate marriage of fast-evolving tank technologies and the deadly firepower of the 88mm gun. But this battlefield big cat was simply too costly and difficult to produce. Just over 1,300 Tiger tanks were built in World War II, in comparison to over 57,000 Russian T-34s.
Because the Germans didn't have a lot of them at any one place, at any one time, it wasn't a war winner.
The Waffen-SS couldn't rely on the Tiger. They simply couldn't make enough of them. As the war raged on, they'd have to go back to basics, back to their origins, back to cold, hard steel.
You're holding it like a hatchet and you're coming straight at somebody. They were done.
The Waffen-SS was one of the 20th century's most formidable and evil elite forces. Armed with cutting-edge weaponry, Adolf Hitler would assign his best divisions to almost impossible missions. They would be tested to their absolute limits when Hitler ordered the invasion of Russia in 1941.
The fighting on the Eastern Front was a knockdown, drag-out fight. The SS didn't take prisoners. Russians didn't take SS prisoners either, so it could get really nasty.
The political indoctrination of the SS gave them an unfaltering belief in the Nazi cause. They simply believed they were unbeatable, especially against the Russians, who they saw as racially inferior.
The indoctrination received by the Waffen-SS in their basic training made the word retreat disappear from the SS vocabulary. They fought to the last man, to the last round.
This was what was expected of Hitler's henchmen. When they completed their training, the soldiers of the Waffen-SS were presented with a ceremonial dagger. It represented their sworn loyalty to their Fuhrer.
This is an SS honor dagger. The inscription on this is "Mein Ehre ist true," which is "My honor is my loyalty," which was the motto of the Waffen-SS.
The SS dagger was covered in ancient symbols like the swastika.
Well, Hitler was very much into symbolism. A lot of mysticism and occult involved in it. Black Knights, Blackguard, everything was put there to strike fear into the enemy and pride into the Greater German Reich.
During the early years of the war, regular German army units looked down on the SS. They weren't battle-hardened. They weren't feared. They weren't respected.
The German army had a very poor opinion of the SS. The SS was a political force. They were policemen. They just weren't soldiers. They had to earn respect.
The SS would soon earn a fearsome reputation.
In the beginning, the SS didn't fare very well in battle, but as their skills were polished, trial by fire, they became extremely effective, and later were the ones that in multiple battles just held the lines open to pull out the entire army groups.
Fast forward to July 1943. In the battle for the Russian city of Kursk, the heavily armed, highly mobile SS Panzer Corps attacked with tanks. But Stalin's Red Army had prepared a deadly defense around Kursk, including over 500,000 anti-tank mines. With the German tanks sidelined, the Waffen-SS's abilities in hand-to-hand combat were put to use.
This is your basic K98 bayonet. In trench attacks or close quarter attacks, it was extremely effective. You thrust and twist. This was very devastating, especially if it wasn't sharpened. You couldn't repair the tears, whereas a sharpened blade would make a very clean cut, easy to repair, easy to save the soldier.
In a no-holds-barred battle, even the most basic infantryman's tools were used as lethal weapons.
This is your standard entrenching tool. You have a longer reach than a bayonet. It is much heavier. It can do a lot more damage. You're holding it like a hatchet and you're coming straight at somebody, you can cave anybody's head in with one shot. You hit somebody with one of those, they were done.
The savage fighting around Kursk would end in a Russian victory. But the Waffen-SS were now firmly established as a fearful adversary. In September 1944, the Allies would launch a vast airborne attack into occupied Holland, codenamed Operation Market Garden.